I had a drinking problem for many years. It masked as fun.
I've heard you previously say it took those 30 marathons in a desert to understand who I really want to be.
Addicts make great endurance athletes, I've found.
Spencer Matthews is an endurance athlete, health advocate, founder and entrepreneur. He holds 3 Guinness World Record titles, most recently setting the world record for the fastest completion of Ironman distance triathlon on all 7 continents. He hosts the Untapped podcast, where he sits down with guests from all walks of life to understand how they have overcome personal challenges, found their untapped potential. I really enjoyed finding out a little bit more about you before doing this show. So I'm sorry up front for perhaps bringing a little bit of prejudgment that you've put to bed in the reading that I've done.
Well, thank you. Yes, some of my decisions in my earlier life do still impact how people might perceive me. But thanks very much. No, listen, I think, the path that I'm on more recently is a good one. I feel purposeful and healthy, and, I'm really enjoying pushing my own boundaries and limits in pursuit of, trying to understand my own potential, but also, raising funds for incredible causes. People ask how you keep going in the challenges. It's pretty easy, to be honest, to keep going when you're focused on, a fundraise that is going to be helpful to those charities.
Over the last 20 years, I think I've interviewed many people whose lives have been transformed and changed by physical activity. But for you, that really sang true really quickly.
For me, my life transformed when I made a very conscious and immediate effort to change my relationship with alcohol. I had a drinking problem for many years. It masked as fun initially. And by the way, I'm not anti-alcohol. I'll have the occasional drink, from time to time. But I respect it now, and how harmful it can be. And I'm aware of it. I'm more conscious of my behavior. I think I found so much time, when you decide to give something so toxic and consuming a break. And you channel that into, I found myself channeling that into different avenues, more positive avenues. People sometimes say to me, well, you're an alcoholic who's now obsessed with running. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not wrong. But being obsessed with running is pretty positive, I think. It's about the healthiest thing, in my humble opinion, that you can do. It's great for your heart, it's great for your mind, it's great for your, physicality. As as a keen runner and host of a podcast that is focused around this kind of, movement and running, it is transformational. I think it can transform anyone. And I'm a huge believer that change is possible. I love change and growth and learning. I'm fascinated by other people's achievements. I'm fascinated by extraordinary, athletic achievements. I love the Olympics. I love the World Championship. I love watching people, because I think when you get into something like running, you can really understand what it must take for a person to be able to go and achieve that extraordinary thing. I don't know. I just feel a bit more considered, less rushed. I always used to look for shortcuts. I always used to look for quick, easy wins, quick, easy ways to make money, quick, easy ways to get fit, quick, easy ways to get strong, whatever. And it turns out that consistency and just building slowly in life, will get you where you need to go, I think, in a more wholesome manner than how I used to be, I think.
If you could rewind back, what would you tell your 10-year-old self with the knowledge that you now have? I
lost my brother when I was 10. So I would tell my 10-year-old self that Michael will serve as a, force for good for you in your life, and that you'll be, I feel like I've almost been on a relatively constant mission to feel like he might be proud of me. I know it's a strange thing to say, because obviously, when people are dead, obviously they can't be proud of anything. But it's kind of I love the idea that my brother is looking down on us, smiling, and that he likes what's happening. And I used it for good when I was abusing alcohol over and over again. I would feel shame. I would look in the mirror and think, I bet Michael thinks that you're a real loser, and that would be he would be my judgment type thing that I would just channel through stuff from time to time. Just to answer the question without getting deep, I would tell my 10-year-old self that focus and discipline are important, that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve with your life. And I know it's a really blasé thing to say that people can do anything. Because of course, I can't be an astronaut or a Formula One racing driver or anything that requires intelligence or skill that I simply don't possess. What I mean by that is, if you really, really care about something and you really want something and you give time to it, your chances of succeeding at that thing, I think, are quite high for your just general person, like building a business. If you love what you're doing and you care about it and you give yourself to it and it makes sense and you can get other people to feel what you're feeling, generally speaking, you've got a really good chance of that going somewhere. If you're desperate to run a sub 3 hour marathon, if I write you a plan, or Chris Taylor, better still, writes you a plan, and you stick to that plan for the amount of time that he asks you to stick to that plan, you will achieve your goal, right? So it's about giving yourself to stuff. And again, to my previous point of having shortcuts, like, it's really difficult to achieve anything meaningful, I've found, by not doing the work, right? So I think I just think that would be a bit of a heavy chat for a 10-year-old. But I suppose I might. It's young, and I'd be interested to know why you chose that age. Had you said 15, I would have said, being the loudest center of attention is not the be all and end all. Have a social life, but don't focus as much on it as you are. Lay off the alcohol, don't fall into this tempestuous trap of having to be out all the time. Like, for years, I drank alcohol, like most days and pretty much every night. I was out every single night till 3 or 4. I might take the occasional day off, but not really. I was talking about it with my mate this morning. Vogue's cousin is one of my best friends. Yeah. And like I just said to him, we walked past the pub that I used to go to because we had breakfast this morning. And I said, Jesus Christ, I was in there every day, for so long. I'd go in there at whenever, drink pints and pints and then whiskey, and then I'd go out all night, every night. And like, it's just so unhealthy. And, I know a lot of people that love a drink and love a social life who also focus on other things. I just didn't have that. I was I was like a competitive socialite. Like, I've taken the idea of like wanting to be a great founder and a great runner or whatever, but like I had applied all of that to partying. Like I was almost I was an elite partier, but no, unfortunately there's no value in being good at that, really. And I'm glad of the changes. But I don't know. Why did you ask me about a 10-year-old? Why was that important, the number 10?
I thought of that age because I thought, well, that would have been the age at which you perhaps went through some difficult and challenging things moving on. So had you been more equipped with the skill set that you've got now, would you have led into that phase of your life differently and not have been 30 before you kind of, put the party medals down and picked up the marathon or the triathlon or the change in person medal? Does that make sense?
It's always a difficult, well, not difficult. It's always an interesting thought that, like, the what if. And I don't know, if I was more like my brother, right, who never had issues with alcohol and wasn't a big partier and worked really hard from a really young age and was a competitive world champion racing driver from a very young age, I would be less like I am now, right? Because I wouldn't have had those feelings of wanting to be accepted by him, and those feelings of wanting my father to be proud of me, right? Because I had years of shame and years of like trying to almost gain approval from certain people. I was a black sheep in my own family. I've always been loved by my family. I'm not pretending that I've had some terrible childhood. I've had a wonderful upbringing. I'm a very privileged person, but like I wouldn't feel on the inside track within my own family, right? Like my brother and my dad would have the business chats, and I'd be, I wouldn't be involved in that. And I kind of want to be involved. And they'd just be like, well, what do you bring to the table? There'd almost be a lack of trust, right? Because it's like, you're the local pisshead, basically. Firstly, you probably don't understand what we're talking about. And second, but that's kind of fair enough. So I spent a little while, really, really, well, and when I put the bottle down, I really wanted like their approval. I really wanted them to be proud of me and look at me differently and take me seriously, right? I've never felt like I was taken seriously really by anyone. So, that all changed really with the 30 marathons. Like when I finished Jordan, like there was this huge shift in the way people perceived me for a while. Obviously things always go back to, their natural resting point. But like when we came out of that, journalists would treat me differently. I'd get asked better questions. There'd be more exciting and interesting opportunities. My father was really proud of me. Like the whole thing just felt like, isn't this a positive thing? And I can remember coming out of that feeling like, I want more of this.
I think I've heard you previously say it took those 30 marathons in a desert to understand, who I really want to be. And ever since then, you've really like wrapped that endurance challenge philosophy into part of who you are, part of who you are. And I've seen, I when I first started doing marathon talk, I interviewed a fantastic guy called Bob Groves. He was a London cabbie, right? But he was also a cocaine addict. And he had so many incredible stories, and he fell into running and he realized, I love running. And then when physical activity and running kind of bumps into people later on, and it really helps them in their life, I'm like, you're welcome to this party. Welcome to this party, because it's a good place for you to be.
It's fantastic. And also it's interesting you mentioned that. Addicts make great endurance athletes, I've found, because they have this strange mentality of competitiveness and wanting to win, and they're thrill seekers. Addicts, in theory, are thrill seekers. They love that dopamine hit. They keep coming back for more, and you obviously can get that, from health and exercise and running. One of the most fascinating people I know, not dissimilar to, did you say the taxi driver was Bob?
Yeah.
Bob, yeah. But one of the most fascinating people I know in my life was an extraordinary cocaine addict, an alcoholic. Never terrible with it, but just fascinating businessman. Got thrown out of his own business. He built Volcom. His name is Tucker Hall. Volcom, the surf brand and skateboard brand, very, very famous brand, massive brand. Got bought out in the very early days when it started going by the company. They paid him very well to step away just because he was a complete wreckhead. Took the money, and he's now clean sober. He runs AA meetings in Idaho and has a beautiful place in Santa Barbara. Mad cyclist, probably cycles for 4 or 5 hours every single day, runs a bit, doing all kinds of endurance stuff late in his life. He's 60 something. But he is also just this wonderful storyteller, of his former life. It's very similar to your friend Bob. But I love this guy.
The way in which your previous experiences shape you, and then the way you're guided to in your case, it's movement, physical activity, running, triathlon. Because I talked to you a lot about some of those experiences, but I think you've done London, right?
Yeah, I did London last year.
Was it the first time you've done London?
Yeah. I received beautiful. I loved it so much. I'm in or around the 3-hour mark, right? I did London in 3:07. In my defense, I'd been away for 2.5 weeks just before London. We were having a lot of fun on that holiday. We drank alcohol, and we went for late dinners, and it was a very relaxed Easter family holiday with Vogue and the kids, and it was a beautiful thing. I didn't have I wasn't training. I wasn't in a training block. I didn't have a space for London. I hadn't asked, and about a week before, I got an email saying, like, from my then agent, do you want to run London? And I was like, oh God, yeah, of course, that'd be great, but I'm not ready for it really, and set off with the quiet, hope of maybe running a sub 3, and got to 33 kilometers at sub 3 hour marathon pace. And then the legs just didn't have the last 9. I felt great. I wasn't in pain. I just couldn't get the legs moving for the last 9. So I went from a 4:15 average to a 4:40 average, and ended up at like a 4:21 average, which, as you know, is outside of. I kind of cruised in at 3:07. Because I simply just couldn't go any faster, and it was beautiful. I had the best day. I wasn't in any kind of pain or anything, and it's just the best. London is just fantastic. Like it's incredible, the scenes and the vibe, and I just loved it. Like I didn't really feel like I deserved the sub 3, so. I was kind of running around. I was high-fiving people, and I wasn't running the marathon line. And I'm not claiming a 3:03, but my Coros had me crossing 42.2 at 3:03, right? So I ran an additional 600 meters or whatever it is, 700 meters, because I was zigzagging around and not running the line. So at the end, I was like, I've probably got this sub 3 in the bag if I just do some longer distance weeks, in the build up to it. And I didn't do anything for a month before it. So I kind of felt all right. Went to Berlin thinking, right, I've got this in the bag, because now I haven't drank in 6 weeks, and I've been running, and I feel great, and I'm in business in Berlin, and then because London was such a vibe, and I had music, and I carried my phone, but I couldn't use it. Like every time I put a song on, I couldn't hear the song. There's so much support, right? Like people are screaming, shouting the whole way. So I was like, in London, I was like, shit, I shouldn't have brought my phone. Really, there's no need for me to be carrying my phone and music, because it's so great. So I left Berlin, the hotel room, and I was like, actually, I don't need music. I'll leave my phone and my headphones in the room, and I'll just set off. And I was going for a 2:55 in Berlin. Set off at 4:07s or something, even a touch faster. Ran the first 10K in 41 minutes. This is no music. And then, it was 24 degrees, and it was a bad day out, and I realized that about 15K in, I was like, woo, like this is going to be, this is going pear-shaped already type thing. So I slowed down to kind of 4:20 average for the rest of the race, and clocked to 3:06. So I think if I had music right in Berlin, I might have been all right.
There's a real difference in marathon running when you're trying to get like the final 5 minutes, the final 10 minutes. What you've done in all of your other endurance challenges is, like you've reveled in the suffering. Yeah. Like I've done some triathlons, I've done some Ironman, I've done Hawaii, I've done long distance runs, I've done, I swim in the cold sea in the winter when it's 5 degrees. And I watched your, something, you recanting the Antarctica triathlon. I'm like, that's brutal. That sea is Baltic. That bike ride, a shocker. Just the mentality of round and round, up, and like the mentality that you need. That's real suffering, right? But marathon running, particularly when you're trying to put yourself on the red line, That's not really suffering in the same way. That's tolerating high levels of discomfort, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there is a difference. It's a subtle difference, but marathon runners listening will know, because it's like, right, I am right on the edge of everything I've got here, and I could tip the other way. And I love that journey along a knife edge of discomfort as much as the suffering. Are you going to spend more time in that place?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that my experience with Berlin was outside of the, like, what felt like potentially life-threatening moments during Project 7, and there were two where you feel like you're kind of passing out in cold water, and you know, you're delighted that you're so well supported. That's more like danger, right? It's slow and it's dangerous. Then the bike ride in you know, I was averaging 11 kilometers an hour on the bike. So it's not physically taxing at all, right? You're pedaling a mountain bike, and you have to be conscious. And it's more of a, how can I just take myself somewhere else here and allow 19 hours to go by, right? So it's a different kind of thing, to your point. That day in Berlin, in the heat, with no music, struggling for, let's say, 32 kilometers of the race is one of the worst sporting feelings I've ever had, right? It's a really, really uncomfortable, awful thing. You look at it as well, and the worst thing about it is you know everything about it, right? Because you've got all your data. So you can look down at your watch and go, there's 32k left of this, and I'm gonna suffer the whole way through it. You know, there won't be nice periods where you can be picked up by some awesome tune, right? Which I'm doing Tokyo in March 1st. I've never been to Japan. Going a few days out early. Like, I'm taking it touch more seriously. I am in a training block. Look, having experienced Berlin, I don't want to put myself in under too much pressure either, because, you know, ultimately, if I run a 3:02, I'll be happy with that. It's a PB. I want the 2:59, you know, and I think the 2:59 is absolutely there. You know, in training the other day, I ran a 1:23 half, right? So it's there. Like, I 100% like, but I just, that day, I wasn't even going to run a half. I set off to run 10K. I felt light as a feather. I felt full of energy. I was like hovering around, you know, 3:55 to 4:05 pace, casual. Hit the 10, and I was like, I'm just going to crack on. Ran a half, you know, averaged kind of 4:04 or whatever, 4:06 or whatever it might be. I hit 10 and I thought, this is so great. God, I feel so good. Like, imagine doing that, right, in Tokyo. I'd have an hour and 37 minutes left to go sub 3 in the half. So you've got that all day, you know what I mean? Even if you had a shocker in the second half, like, you're fine. But I'm not going to set off at that pace either. So I think, like, this body and the mind that has it, right? But as you know, because you're a far more experienced runner than me, it doesn't take too much for a marathon to go completely pear-shaped and for, you know, stuff to derail you. So I'm going to go in there super confident. I've done lots of work. I'm really happy. I'm not going to carb load like I did in Berlin and have 8 pizzas in the 3 days leading up to it, because I felt horrendous on the start line. I am going to take music. It is going to be 9 degrees. So I think, you know, and there's a bit of downhill as well at the beginning. I'm running it with a good friend.
In marathon running, like, you can get things so beautifully lined up, and then at mile 20, it just comes. It's like Mike Tyson, isn't it? You know, you can prepare as much as you like, you can plan as much as you like, until I punch you in the face.
Oh yeah. No, and listen, like, I think in, like, it's a woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? In Berlin, had I not gone off at 4:05s and just set off at 4:15s, would that have made a massive difference? Probably, actually. If I had music when I was feeling low and I could thump all my favorite, like, big Larry tunes in my ear to give me a bit of a pickup, would that have made a difference? Absolutely, it would have. You know, so Tokyo, I'm just covering my bases. Like, it's not hot. it's a nice flat course. It's quite a fast course. There's that one bottleneck to contend with at the beginning, apparently, at the bottom of the downhill bit. But there's a downhill bit. Hurrah! I think there's 6 meters of elevation across the whole course, which is phenomenal. Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that I won't care. Like if I come out with a 3:01, I'm gonna be pissed off. But like ultimately, I want if I can just get a 2:59.59, that's great. And what I really would like is to run like a 1:25 half and then feel okay, because then you've got that 5 minute window where in theory you could just like slow down to a walk, so that would be a great place to be, like 1:25 half and just somewhat comfortable with that blanket kind of that you could chuck over an issue if you needed to.
And actually in the endurance events that you've done, you've developed the qualities that the second half need. It's like the second half need those characteristics and traits of understanding what it means to know that you can keep going even though things hurt. The first half, they need all the qualities of like the anti-party animal that you've because you can't go off too quickly. You've got to hold it. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to be dedicated.
No, I was just going to say it is a little bit of a different beast. Like as the longer stuff has a big mental element to it. It's like you can look down and think, I've just got off the bike 180k. Now I've got a full marathon to run. Like it's a lot, but it's a grind. It's a different kind of grind. Like I see a marathon as like, you're an RS6 hammering down the motorway and, at some point one of your twin turbos might blow, and you're screwed if that happens, right? It's no good like continuing to rag the car. Like you can't, right? So I think you get broken down differently over the course of different events, like a 24-hour run, which I've done once before on very little prep. I just went down to the Battersea track and asked if they'd stay open, and ran for 24 hours straight, pretty much. Give or take the odd meal. 173k or something, which is by no means a good 24-hour time, but it's quite a long run, and it's kind of like that breaks you down very differently. I think, mate, as far as I'm concerned, like a very fast marathon is. It has the potential to be far more hellish than anything else.
And do you think, let's say you get your wonderfully beautiful Tokyo experience coming in at 2:58. Do you think that's going to take you to the rest of the Abbott World Marathon majors? Have you a desire to do any of the others?
Yeah. I've done New York twice. I did New York when I was really young. I did New York when I was 17 and 19, but that might give you the impression that I've always been a marathoner. I did those two for all the wrong reasons. I was a big drinker even then, and I that was like again me putting on some mask, like, oh, look at me, I may be like some pisshead, but I can run marathons, and they were slow and painful, and I didn't prepare, and I no super shoes, no data, no watch, literally just plodding around and coming in just under 4 hours type thing. So I wouldn't count those really in my new way of life. But yeah, I've ran New York twice. I've done Berlin twice. One recent 3:06 and one 3:40 something many years ago. Again, I think I was trying to prove a point to my then girlfriend who thought I drank too much. She was absolutely right. But so I signed up to a marathon and went and ran the marathon. Look how I don't drink too much. Look, I'm a marathon runner. So yeah, it was kind of all wonky. And then I've run London. So I've got New York, Berlin, London. And so what do I need? Tokyo, Sydney, they've just added Boston,
Chicago.
Yeah, Boston. Yeah, Boston, Chicago, Sydney. We can aim to have those done by December, can't we?
There you go. Sounds like a fun project.
Yeah.